Hey everybody, welcome to the OSG Garage. We got ourselves a beautiful, bright, sunny Northern California day, and today we're going to look at putting bar risers on our Z900. Let's go. So this is my 2020 Kawasaki Z900 naked sport bike. Now, these are great bikes. They're not super expensive. They're a good mid-price bike. You can get them less than 10 grand. They've got a great motor, not too much horsepower, but enough to be pretty fun. This thing's got riding modes. You can have 3 different settings. It's got traction control, engine mapping. It's pretty good for the price you can get for it. So one of the other really great things about this bike is this new TFT display. It's pretty cool for a bike of this price to have something this nice. You got all these different modes. It has road, rain. It has a rider one where you can program it. In this particular mode, I've got full power and I've got the traction control in the highest setting, which is 3. If you take this up to rain mode, that's lowest power and lowest the best traction control settings. Then it has road, which is full power and traction control at 2, and then it has sport mode, which is full power and everything basically turned off. So now what I'm trying to do is do some upgrades to it to get it to be where I can reliably use it day to day to drive to work, do a little bit of longer, hour and a half, 2-hour rides kind of here around the Bay Area. So the first thing we're going to attack is the riding position. Now, comparing this to most sport bikes, it is a little bit more upright. You can see here that I'm not like down on here like I would be for another type of sport bike with fairing and everything on it, like like a Ninja 650 or something like that. But it's got a good position. I would like to get that curve in your back just up a little bit more, about like this. I'm only looking for about maybe an inch or so, 2 inches of rise and back to come this far to give that just a little bit of comfort position for some long distances. So, in order to get these bars to move out a little bit, what most people do is use something called bar risers. And if anybody's been riding motorcycles for a while, they know about bar risers. Here's my collection. I tend to be a hoarder on things. If I buy one bar riser and I don't like the way it looks, I tend to not return it, and I tend to keep them all. Alright, so to be fair, there's also some other pieces in here from dirt bikes and whatnot. But usually what happens with bar risers is this would be the part that would be on the triple tree. And what you do is you put a little spacer in here like this, and then when you go to bolt the top of the triple tree on, this is the way it looks, and then you get this extra bit of space. You can add multiple spacers like this. There's also ones that look kind of like this. These are by Rocks, and these are a little more adjustable. So what you do is you put this in the standard tree, and then you're able to not only have the rise, but you can change the position of the bars front to back to change the reach. So this is the one I'd like to use on the bike, but the Z900 has some, well, let's call it issues. It's a little bit different, and it doesn't really like having bars on it because of the way they mounted everything up. Alright, so we're going to pull off this, believe it or not, they call this a windscreen. And that's another thing too. We're also going to try and add some type of a better windscreen. I got one I'm going to put on here in a minute. So on this bar, you can kind of see where the clamp is here for the bars. They've attached the TFT display to the top of this bar clamp. There's a bracket here that holds this assembly for the turn signals, and it also attaches through 2 tabs on the TFT display. So basically, this TFT display is mounted to the top of this bar clamp and to the front of this bike. So if I change the position of the bars at all, it's going to totally mess up the mounting for this. Now, I've kind of already worked out a solution on how to fix that, so I'm going to take you through step by step on how I did it. But the first thing I want to do is pop off this TFT display and show you a little bit more about how that's mounted up. So basically, there's two 10mm bolts on the back side of this TFT display. And in a minute, when I pull these bolts off, you'll see where it's mounted. So this kind of can go out of the way. Now there's a grommet on this back side here, a rubber grommet that you just kind of pop off. Then you can take this whole thing and kind of roll it out of the way. So now you can kind of see how this whole thing got mounted up. The TFT display has these two bolts here that go through two tabs on the underside of this. You can see the two little bushings there. And they mount everything to this upper bar clamp here, this guy here. And there's a little tab here on the back side that gets pushed down into that grommet. So you can see that if I move these bars up or back or anywhere in here, I'm going to have a hard time getting this thing to mount in the tabs and the places that it needs to be. So I think we'll take this bar clamp off first, put the risers on, put the bars in the right position, and then I'll show you the solution I came up with for mounting this TFT display. All right, we're going to put down, I think, a little towel down on here so we don't scratch anything. I'm going to get a 6mm Allen. Take the bars off. See that clamp? It's got the holes here for screwing all that stuff in this bushing. This bushing here we're going to pop out because we're going to have to reuse this on my bracket that I'm going to make up to be able to do this. Let's get these bars up and out of the way. We're going to put them over here for a second just to get them up and out. Now here's our rocks risers that we have here, and what we're going to do is put them basically in here. Typically what you do with these rocks risers is you reuse the old clamp to press this down and to clamp it in place. The problem on this is you've got these two horns sticking out on the end of this bar clamp, and it's not going to work. So rather than cut that thing up, I went into my box of bits and I found some caps, some clamps that were on a old dirt bike conversion I did. I converted a small bar dirt bike into a fat bar, 1 1/8", and I happen to have some extras. Loosen this up just a bit by hand here so we can get this in the right spot. All right, there we go. Anytime you're working with bar clamps, you want to pay attention to how cinched it is. You don't want to cinch both sides, one side down super tight and have a bigger gap on the end. If there's a gap on here, you want to make sure they're relatively equal when you tighten them down. So for now though, we're just kind of keeping these things in somewhat loose like this, because eventually we're going to have to want to play with the height of everything. Going to lay the bars in there and see where we're at. There you go. Now, all these cables for the most part are pretty loose, except for this one here for the brake cable. I think what I'm going to do is try, after I get everything done up, is to flip this around 180 degrees. There's a little bend in here that goes backwards. If I can turn this 180 degrees upside down like that, it'll shoot it forward and give me enough clearance. Now, this is a full, almost 2-inch rise on this bar. And again, I can put these kind of wherever I want. You want to get them a little higher, you want to lay them down. This is pretty much the best solution for me. Being an old slow guy, I kind of like standing up a little straighter on sitting up a little straighter on my motorcycles. Now, one other thing you're probably going to ask me, why don't you just buy a more upright motorcycle than trying to take one that's laid down and fix it? Well, it has to do with what this thing is. It's a cool bike. It's got a lot of power for what it is. It's got the engine mapping. It's got the traction control changes. It's just really, really good value for a motorcycle. And I don't know if you can tell, but I kind of like Team Green a little bit. All right, so let's see. Can you see the difference in riding position now? This just seems so much better to me. Real nice, kind of upright. A little bit more my to my liking. Here's the before and the after next to each other. It's a little bit, it's not like a lot of difference, but it's enough that I think it makes a big difference to me. So now that we've got that part of it taken care of, let's take a quick look at where we're at. So here is the new mounting position here. Now, one thing I thought about was mounting the old bar clamp onto the top of these and just mounting the TFT onto this. But there's two problems. Number one, the bolt center line isn't the same with these ROX clamps as it is on the one below it, so it wouldn't have lined up. And number two, I would have to pull this thing way up high, and there's not enough travel in the wiring harness here to make that happen. So, after staring at this problem for quite a long time, I came up kind of with a solution. It looks like the gauge wants to be right in this area here. So I came up with a way to make a bracket to use the existing two holes there and this piece here and clamp it to the center of the bar. Let me show you how I did that. So basically what I did is welded this little bracket up here that has the two mounting points drilled and tapped for the back side of the TFT display. I've got a hole here that I can put this bushing into here, so we can use that attachment point the same way. And the only other thing we need to do then is to get some spacers and take up the distance that we're moving this bracket. Let me show you how that works on the bike itself. So what we've got here is this bracket like this. This kind of mounts onto that tab. Oops, flip it upside down like this. Then we're able to put this in position with this under the bar. I don't know if you can see this, but this is kind of the way that the whole assembly is going to go together. I got this bracket here. I put this screw in from the front. Use a spacer here. Use a spacer on there. Go through this hole like that. And do the same on the other side. Now, one thing we had to do here in order to make this happen is to put a little clearance notch in here because that cable was hitting. So we kind of just ground that out. Slide this spacer back in. So now you can see the spacer in there, the bolt, the spacer, the bracket. There's a little bit of overhang, and that's where our bracket is going to attach to. I'm not going to lie to you, this is pretty fiddly getting this all in there, but here you can see how the whole assembly lines up to that bracket. Yeah, and the other thing I want to be clear about on this bracket and this whole assembly, this thing took trial and error of about three or four different times of making up a weldment. Now, so that takes care of mounting this to the front of the bike, and you see down here in the bottom there's an extra little piece down here, and what I'm going to do is put a couple clamps on there right now and show you how that goes together. So working through my pile of brackets that I have, I found these guys. This one's a little flat spacer on the bottom that goes on the underside of this piece here, and then on the top side I use this with a couple bolts, and this just goes through these holes down here. Now, the one thing about this bracket is it's pretty much made up for where I put this piece. There's not a lot of adjustability with it. So if I were to do this again, or you're doing this for your bike, it might be different by the time you end up finishing it because of all the, the way that this thing moves. One thing you could do on this bracket is maybe slot it instead of having two solid holes in it. But I ended up with this riding position. I like it, and I'm just going to leave it where it is. In the future, I might have this more adjustable. All right, so you can see that bracket that I put under there, how it fits, and you can kind of see how it all ties into the TFT display right there. It's by no means an elegant solution, but it does allow this thing, this Z900, to use bar risers and get you to a nice riding position. All in all, it fits pretty well on there. Like I said before, you do have to notch out this cover. This cover went all the way to the back here. You do have to notch out that cover. The cover used to go all the way to the back, and I kind of ground all that down to allow for this thing to come forward. So once you get this assembly all on there, this looks great, but the problem you're going to have is this. There's a gap here for the little tiny thing that they call a windscreen right here. So you could leave the stock one on. These bolts are fine. It's just you need to put some spacers behind here to get this thing to lay a little bit differently. But that's not going to be a problem for us because we are going to install this. This is a PUIG touring windscreen that we're going to install right now. That should space it up a little bit. It stands up a little bit straighter, and we should be good. So the installation for this is relatively straightforward. You basically swap out these bolts for the ones that mount down to the bottom. These are the ones we'll use for the screen, and all of this stuff is what we're going to use to attach the actual windscreen to those brackets. Rubber washers here on like this on these standoffs, and with this particular thing on, it should give us more than enough space to get what we want. All right, let's see how this looks on here. This is what we want or not. Screws. So what do you think, everybody? Got a nice clearance here around, nothing's touching from the windscreen. Everything looks good there. You can still read it pretty well. It's a tiny little windscreen, and it remains to be seen if that's what I'm going to end up with. But for now, I'm pretty happy with that, I gotta tell you. Alright people, so that's going to do it I think for today. Showed you how I did the bar risers. We got the new windscreen on. Everything looks really, really good. And I think we're going to leave it here. At some point in the future, I might be changing out that windscreen for a bigger piece. But I'm going to live with this for a while and see. Well, at least I'm going to live with it for a while until after my Achilles heals back up and I can ride a motorcycle again. So that's going to be it for the OSG Garage today. If you're not already subscribed, please do so. And remember, smash that like button below if you like what you see. And always leave comments too. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about my work here. You can check us out on Instagram at OSG_garage. And I think that'll do it for now. We'll see you guys next time on the OSG Garage. Bye for now.